Before we start, kindly subscribe to my channel and tell me, where in the universe are you watching from? Max Carter had always prided himself on being an ordinary guy. He worked as an engineer, liked fixing things, and avoided unnecessary drama. But today was different. The pounding on his apartment door nearly knocked it off its hinges. Bang, bang, bang. Max groaned and stumbled out of bed, still half asleep. All right, I'm coming. As soon as he unlocked the door, it flew open, nearly slamming into his face. Standing there, in full battle armor, was his neighbor, HFY-SCI. "Max Carter," she said, her voice firm and commanding. "By the sacred rights of my people, you are now my mate." Max blinked. "Wait, what?" Before he could process the words, she grabbed his wrist and pulled him into the hallway. That was when he realized something worse. There were dozens of alien warriors outside his apartment, all watching. Some were cheering. Others were giving him respectful nods. One particularly large alien clapped him on the back so hard he nearly fell over. "This is a great honor," the warrior said. "You have claimed the heart of HFY-SCI, daughter of the Bladeborn." Max rubbed his temples. "Okay, let's pause for a second. I did not claim anything. I don't even know what's happening." HFY-SCI turned to face him fully. "Last night, you intervened in my battle," she said. Max frowned. "I fixed your weapon. You aided me in combat. That is a declaration of intent among my people." Max's stomach sank. He remembered last night. HFY-SCI had been sparring with some fellow warriors outside the complex, and her energy blade had malfunctioned. Being an engineer, he'd taken a quick look, adjusted a few circuits, and handed it back. Apparently, that had been a huge mistake. HFY-SCI crossed her arms. "By HFY law, you have two choices. Accept the bond and fulfill your duty as my mate, or face the trial of worthiness." Max's brain short-circuited. "I'm sorry, the what now?" "The trial," one of the warriors repeated. "A test of strength and skill. Should you lose, your claim to HFY-SCI will be rejected, and you may not survive." Max let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, great, so I can either marry someone I barely know, or die in some alien gladiator fight. Fantastic options." HFY-SCI tilted her head. "You misunderstand. Our bond is a sacred thing. You have proven yourself already." Max pinched the bridge of his nose. "I fixed a weapon. That doesn't mean I'm ready for an intergalactic marriage." HFY-SCI studied him for a long moment. Then, to Max's horror, she smiled. It wasn't a sweet or reassuring smile. It was the kind of smile a predator gives when it finds something interesting. "You are clever," she said. "I like that." Max gulped. "Look, I respect your culture, but can we please find a way out of this that doesn't involve me getting beaten to death?" One of the warriors grinned. "You could always prove your devotion instead." Max narrowed his eyes. "How?" HFY-SCI's expression softened, just slightly. "A proper HFY mate does not run from battle." Max's stomach churned. "You want me to fight you." "Not fight," she corrected. "Train. If you truly do not wish for this bond, I will give you one chance. Survive a week of HFY warrior training. If you do, I will release you from the claim." Max exhaled. "A week? That's it." HFY-SCI nodded. It sounded like a much better option than dying in the trial of worthiness. Max straightened his shoulders. "Fine. 1 week. But if I survive, I go back to my normal, non-married life." HFY-SCI's eyes gleamed. "Agreed." As Max looked around at the very large, very dangerous warriors surrounding him, he had a sinking feeling. This was going to be the hardest week of his life. Max Carter stood in the middle of an open training arena, sweating buckets. Surrounding him were towering HFY warriors, all watching with amused expressions. His so-called fiancé, HFY-SCI, stood a few feet away, holding 2 wooden combat sticks. "This is ridiculous," Max muttered under his breath. HFY-SCI tossed one of the sticks at him. He barely caught it before it smacked him in the face. "We begin," she said, twirling her own weapon with ease. "Survive 3 minutes." Max forced a weak smile. "Okay, see, when humans train, we usually start with instructions before jumping straight into." Vexeri lunged. Max yelped and barely dodged as the wooden stick whooshed past his head. His instincts screamed at him to run, but the gathered Ktheri warriors were watching with interest, murmuring among themselves. He was pretty sure that if he ran now, they'd decide he wasn't worthy of, well, breathing. Vexeri didn't slow down. She spun and struck again. This time, Max managed to block, but the force of the impact rattled his arms. "Ow! What is this stick made of? Steel?" Vexeri smirked. "A good mate must be strong." "Great. You know what else makes a good mate? Communication." Max ducked under another swing. Vexeri tilted her head. "Then communicate with me, Max Carter." Max backed up, gripping his weapon tightly. "Okay, I communicate that I am not a warrior. I communicate that I would very much like to not have my bones broken. I communicate that this is ACK." She swept his legs out from under him, and he hit the ground with a grunt. The watching warriors laughed, clearly enjoying the show. Vexeri extended a hand to him. "You lasted 30 seconds. Max groaned. "Oh, fantastic. I only have to survive 2.5 more minutes of this nightmare." She pulled him to his feet easily. "You are fast. And clever. But you hesitate. That will get you killed." Max dusted himself off. "Yeah, well, humans don't usually solve their problems by hitting each other." Vexeri's brow furrowed slightly, as if the idea was completely foreign to her. "Then how do you win battles?" Max sighed. "We try not to fight. We use strategy, words, outthinking our opponents." Vexeri studied him for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she set her stick aside. "Then show me," she said. Max blinked. "Oh, what?" "If words are your weapon," Vexeri said, "convince me that you should not have to fight." Max hesitated. He glanced at the warriors watching them. Some looked curious, others looked unimpressed. He took a deep breath. "All right," he said. "Let's say I do marry you. What happens next?" Vexeri straightened. "You will be honored. You will fight beside me. Our bond will strengthen." Max nodded. "And what if I die in combat because I'm not like you?" Vexeri's expression flickered. Max pressed on. "Wouldn't that dishonor you? Having a weak mate, wouldn't it be better if I helped in other ways?" Vexeri narrowed her eyes. "Such as?" Max tapped his temple. "I'm an engineer. I can improve your weapons, your ships, your entire combat strategy. I can outthink your enemies instead of just outpunching them." Silence. The warriors murmured among themselves. Vexeri crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she nodded. "You have made your case," she said. "Tomorrow, we train a different way." Max exhaled in relief. "Thank you." Then she smirked. "But first, we spar again." Max groaned. This was going to be a long week. Max Carter was sore. Every muscle in his body ached from the relentless training. He had barely survived yesterday's sparring session with Vexeri. And now, as he dragged himself to the training grounds again, he wondered if he'd even last the week. Vexeri was already there, waiting. She stood with her arms crossed, watching him approach. "You move slow today," she said. Max groaned. "Maybe because someone knocked me to the ground 20 times yesterday." Vexeri smirked. "Only 20. I went easy on you." Max sighed and rolled his shoulders. "So, what's on today's schedule?" "More smack Max around until he learns to fight lessons." Vexeri shook her head. "You spoke of strategy. Now you will prove it." Max perked up. "Wait, really? No fighting?" "No fighting," she confirmed. "Today, we train your mind." Max nearly fell to his knees in gratitude. Finally, something I can actually win at. HFY-SCI turned and motioned for him to follow. They walked through the training grounds until they reached a long table covered with alien weapons, plasma blades, energy blasters, and strange devices Max didn't recognize. Several Cathari warriors stood nearby, their expressions skeptical. Max frowned. What's all this? HFY-SCI picked up a sleek energy blaster and tossed it to him. These are the weapons of my people. If you are to fight differently, you must understand them. Max turned the weapon over in his hands, inspecting its design. The craftsmanship was impressive, sleek, durable, and efficient. But as he examined it more closely, he noticed something. This power core is unstable, he muttered. HFY-SCI's eyes narrowed. Explain. Max flipped the blaster over and pointed to a small circuit near the trigger. See this? If too much energy builds up here, the weapon could overload. It won't explode, but it'll short out in the middle of battle. One of the warriors scoffed. Impossible. Our weapons are the best in the galaxy. Max raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah? Then let me prove it. He grabbed another blaster, made a few quick adjustments, and handed it to HFY-SCI. Try firing this one now. She aimed at a nearby target and pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. HFY-SCI frowned. The gathered warriors exchanged uncertain glances. Max grinned. Told you. That flaw means if an enemy knew about it, they could disable your weapons mid-fight. I just did it with a few tweaks. HFY-SCI stared at the weapon, then at Max. Slowly, a smile spread across her face. You are dangerous, she said. Max blinked. Oh, thanks. She turned to the warriors. This human has just exposed a weakness in our arsenal, a weakness we did not see. The warriors murmured among themselves, their skepticism replaced with something else. Respect. Max scratched the back of his head. Look, I'm not trying to insult your weapons. They're incredible. But sometimes, the smallest flaw can change the outcome of a battle. HFY-SCI nodded. Then you will teach us. Max froze. Wait. What? You will train my warriors in your kind of combat, she said, not with strength, but with knowledge. Max hesitated. Yesterday, he was just trying to survive this crazy engagement. Now, he was being asked to train an entire squad of alien warriors. But as he looked at HFY-SCI, at the way she was watching him, trusting him, he realized something. Maybe he could do this. Maybe he didn't have to be a fighter to prove himself. He took a deep breath and nodded. All right, he said. Let's get started. Max Carter stood in the middle of the training ground, surrounded by towering Cathari warriors. They all had their arms crossed, watching him with skeptical expressions. Teaching them strategy was not going to be easy. All right, Max said, clapping his hands together. Today's lesson: fighting smarter, not harder. One of the warriors, a particularly large one named Ravik, snorted. A true warrior needs strength, not tricks. Max smirked. Oh yeah. Then let's test that theory. He pointed to a large stone slab at the edge of the training ground. Ravik, be a champ and break that rock for me. Ravik grinned. Gladly. He stomped over to the stone, cracked his knuckles, and punched it with full force. The rock shattered into pieces. The warriors cheered. Max nodded. Impressive. But now, watch this. He walked over to another stone, just as big as the first. Instead of punching it, he pulled a small device from his pocket. It was just a simple energy tool he had tweaked earlier. He pressed a button, placed it against the stone, and crack! The rock split cleanly down the middle with zero effort. Silence fell over the warriors. Max grinned. See, strength is great, but efficiency wins wars. HFY-SCI, who had been watching with her arms crossed, tilted her head. You would make a fine tactician. Max shrugged. I'd rather not be in a war at all, but if I have to be, I'd rather win with the least amount of effort. Ravik stepped forward, eyes narrowing. Then let us test your tactics. Max sighed. Let me guess, you wanna fight me? Ravik grinned. If you can last 3 minutes without being defeated, I will admit you are right. Max looked up at the massive warrior and groaned. Why do I keep getting into these situations? HFY-SCI smirked. Because you are entertaining. The warriors laughed. Max rubbed his temples. Fine. 3 minutes. But no weapons. Ravik cracked his knuckles. Agreed. The second Max gave a nod. Ravik lunged at him. Max didn't even try to fight back. Instead, he ducked and rolled to the side. Ravik spun, confused for a second. Stop running, human. Max grinned. Nope. Ravik charged again. This time, Max grabbed a handful of sand and tossed it into the air. Ravik instinctively shielded his eyes, just for a second. But that second was all Max needed. He darted behind the warrior and climbed onto a low-hanging ledge above the training area. Hey, big guy, Max called from above. Still think brute force is the answer. Ravik growled and tried to grab him, but Max stayed just out of reach. The warriors watching began to murmur among themselves. HFY-SCI crossed her arms. He is not fighting like a warrior, but he is winning. Ravik swung again, but Max jumped down, rolling safely away. Tick-tock, buddy. 3 minutes is almost up. By the time the countdown ended, Ravik was panting, clearly frustrated. Max walked up and patted his arm. See, strength is one tool, but strategy, that's how you win. The warriors all exchanged glances. Then, to Max's surprise, Ravik laughed. You are an annoying human, he said, but I respect you. Max grinned. I get that a lot. HFY-SCI stepped closer, her voice softer. You continue to surprise me, Max Carter. Max's heart did a weird little flip at the way she said his name. He wasn't sure what was scarier, the HFY warriors or the fact that he was actually starting to like his new life. Max Carter was starting to feel like he belonged. After days of training, teaching, and narrowly avoiding getting his bones crushed, the HFY warriors no longer saw him as just a weak human. They still teased him, sure, but there was respect now. Even Ravik, who had once wanted to smash him into the ground, now greeted him with a firm clap on the back that nearly sent Max flying every time. But the biggest change? HFY-SCI. She was watching him differently now, not just with amusement, but with something deeper, something thoughtful. And honestly, that terrified him more than any fight. Right now, Max was standing in the middle of the HFY village, tinkering with a broken energy blade. He had promised to improve their weapons, and that's exactly what he was doing. A small crowd of warriors had gathered, curious to see if the clever human could actually make their gear better. Max twisted a wire, adjusted the power output, and FZZT. The energy blade hummed to life, glowing brighter than before. One of the warriors, a young recruit named Talrin, tested it with a quick slash through the air. The blade cut effortlessly through a thick training post, leaving a clean, smoking line behind. Talrin's eyes widened. It's stronger. Max grinned. You're welcome. The warriors murmured in approval, nodding to one another. Even Ravik gave him an impressed grunt. Then Max felt a presence beside him. He turned and nearly jumped when he saw HFY-SCI standing very close. She studied him for a moment, then, without a word, handed him something. It was a knife, a beautifully crafted, curved HFY blade, its hilt wrapped in intricate patterns. The metal was unlike anything Max had seen before, dark, smooth, and shimmering faintly under the sunlight. He looked up at HFY-SCI, confused. Is this for me? HFY-SCI nodded. It is a warrior's gift. Max blinked. I'm not a warrior. She tilted her head. You have earned respect. This is an honor. Max swallowed. He wasn't exactly an expert in HFY culture, but he knew this was a big deal. Around them, the other warriors had gone quiet, watching the exchange with interest. Carefully, Max took the knife. It felt right in his hand. Balanced, light, deadly. He looked back at Vexari. "I don't know what to say." She smirked. "Then say nothing. Just do not lose it." Max chuckled. "I'll try not to." There was a pause, a long, lingering silence between them. And for the first time, Max wasn't thinking about survival or strategy. He was just aware of her, the way she stood, the way she watched him, the way her presence made his heart beat just a little faster. Then, to his surprise, Vexari reached out and lightly touched his shoulder. "You are different from us," she said, her voice softer now. "But you are not weak." Max felt warmth spread through his chest. Before he could say something stupid, a loud boom echoed through the village. Everyone turned toward the sound. Smoke rose in the distance. A scout ran toward them, breathing hard. "Commander, a Kitheri warship approaches. Hostile markings." Vexari's expression hardened instantly. She turned to Max. "Stay here." Max gripped the knife in his hand. Yeah, like that was going to happen. The ground shook as the hostile Kitheri warship descended, kicking up clouds of dust and debris. Max Carter gripped the knife Vexari had given him, his heart pounding. Vexari and her warriors were already moving, forming a defensive line at the edge of the village. Their energy weapons hummed to life, glowing with deadly light. Max knew Kitheri warriors were fierce, but something about Vexari's stance, calm, focused, unshakable, sent a chill down his spine. Then the warship's doors slammed open. A group of heavily armed Kitheri warriors stepped out, their armor sleek and battle-scared. Leading them was a massive figure, taller than Vexari, with a deep scar running across his cheek. His eyes locked onto her immediately. "Vexari," he called, his voice rough. "You dishonor our traditions." Vexari didn't flinch. "Torek," she said, her tone cold. "You are not welcome here." Max frowned. "Great. This guy already sounds like bad news." Torek smirked. "You reject the old ways. You refuse to follow what is right." He gestured toward his warriors. "We are here to remind you." Max didn't like the sound of that. He leaned toward Ravik, whispering, "Who's this guy?" Ravik kept his eyes on the enemy, but muttered, "Torek, a rival warlord. He believes only the strongest should rule." Max swallowed. Fantastic. Another muscle-headed maniac. Torek's gaze suddenly shifted to Max. His smirk widened. "And this is the human I have heard of." Max gave a nervous wave. "Bah, hi." The enemy warriors chuckled darkly. Torek shook his head. "This is a disgrace. You choose him as your mate." Max nearly choked. "Excuse me." Vexari's grip tightened on her weapon. "That is none of your concern." Torek laughed. "It is my concern, because I challenge you." A murmur ran through the Kitheri warriors. Max glanced around, suddenly feeling very out of the loop. He turned to Ravik again. "Oh, what exactly does challenge mean in this context?" Ravik sighed. "It means he will fight Vexari for dominance. If he wins, he takes her place as leader." Max's stomach dropped. "And if she refuses?" Ravik gave him a grim look. "Then he claims victory by default, and she will be forced to go with him." Max's fists clenched. No way in hell was that happening. Vexari stepped forward. "I accept your challenge." Torek grinned, raising his blade. "Good. Then let us begin." The two warriors circled each other, the tension crackling like electricity in the air. Max hated this. He had seen Vexari fight. She was incredible. But Torek was bigger, stronger. He was dangerous. And the fact that he thought he could just take her like some kind of prize. That made Max's blood boil. He had to do something. Then an idea hit him. A reckless, probably stupid idea. Max took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Wait." Everyone turned to look at him. Max pointed at Torek. If you're so obsessed with strength, why don't you fight me instead? A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Vexeri's eyes widened. Max, no. Torek let out a booming laugh. You? A human. Challenge me. Max forced himself to nod. Yeah. What's the matter? Afraid you'll lose. The warriors murmured, some even smirking. Max knew Cathari culture by now. Insulting someone's strength was a big deal. Torek's grin turned into a snarl. Fine. I accept. Max's heart pounded. He was about to fight a warlord, and he had no idea how to win. Max Carter had done a lot of reckless things in his life, but standing in a battle circle, facing down a towering Cathari warlord with nothing but a knife and sheer audacity, this topped the list. Torek grinned, rolling his shoulders. You should have stayed silent, human. Now I will crush you, and Vexeri will see what a true warrior looks like. Max exhaled slowly. His mind raced. He could not win this fight with brute force. Torek was built like a tank. But Max had one advantage. He wasn't playing by Cathari rules. The warriors gathered, watching in silence. Even Vexeri stood still, fists clenched, her gaze locked on him. Then, with a roar, Torek charged. Max didn't wait. He ran, but not away. He sprinted straight toward Torek. At the last second, he dropped into a slide, narrowly avoiding the warlord's swinging blade. Torek stumbled forward, momentarily thrown off balance. Max popped back to his feet and grinned. Wow, you're slow. Torek snarled and swung again. Max dodged left, then right, narrowly escaping each blow. He wasn't trying to fight back. He was making Torek waste energy. The watching warriors murmured. This was not how a proper Cathari battle was fought. But Max wasn't Cathari. Torek growled, his frustration mounting. Enough of this. He lunged with all his strength. That was the moment Max had been waiting for. Instead of dodging, he stepped toward Torek, letting the warlord's momentum do the work. At the last second, Max dropped low and kicked his opponent's leg out from under him. With a thud, Torek crashed to the ground. The warriors gasped. Max didn't give him time to recover. He jumped onto the fallen warlord's back and pressed his knife lightly against his neck. Yield, Max said, his voice steady. Torek froze, his breathing heavy. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, he growled, I yield. Max stepped back, breathing hard. He had done it. The gathered warriors erupted in noise, some shocked, some impressed. Vexeri stepped forward. She stared at Max for a long moment, then smirked. You continue to surprise me, Max Carter. Max gave her a lopsided grin. Yeah, I have a habit of that. Torek stood, rage flickering in his eyes. But it was muted now, mixed with something else. You are not weak. Max shrugged. Never said I was. Torek let out a rough laugh and turned to Vexeri. I have no claim here. The human has proven himself. With that, he gestured to his warriors, and they left without another word. As soon as they were gone, Max collapsed onto the ground with a groan. I am so gonna feel that tomorrow. Ravik chuckled. You fought well, little human. Then, to Max's surprise, Vexeri reached down and helped him up. She leaned in slightly, her voice quiet. You challenged a warlord for my honor. Max blinked. Yeah. Well, couldn't let some musclehead boss you around. She studied him for a moment, then gave a slow nod. You are not Cathari, Max Carter, but today you have earned the respect of my people. Max felt warmth spread through his chest. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to belong here. The village was alive with celebration. Fires crackled, warriors laughed, and the scent of sizzling meat filled the air. Max Carter sat near the center of it all, still sore from his fight with Torek, but feeling damn good. He had won. Not just the fight, but something bigger, respect. Ravik dropped a heavy mug into Max's hands. Drink, human. You earned it. Max eyed the drink suspiciously. What is this? Ravik smirked. Something strong. Max took a sip, then coughed violently as the fiery liquid burned down his throat. Oh, that is definitely strong. Ravik roared with laughter, clapping Max on the back so hard he nearly fell forward. HFY-SCI watched from nearby, her expression unreadable. Finally, she stood and approached him. You are still breathing, she said. Max grinned. Barely. She sat down beside him, closer than usual. The noise of the celebration seemed to fade just a little. You did not have to fight, she said quietly. Max shrugged. Didn't feel like standing around while some guy tried to claim you like a trophy. She studied him for a long moment. You are different. I hear that a lot. A flicker of something crossed her face. Something softer. Different. Is not bad. Max swallowed. His heart was suddenly beating faster, and it had nothing to do with the fight. HFY-SCI hesitated, then reached into a pouch at her side. She pulled out a small metal emblem and placed it in his hand. It was circular, with intricate markings carved into it. Max frowned. What's this? A warrior's mark, she said. A symbol that you stand among us. That you are one of us. Max turned it over in his hands. It was heavy, solid, real. For the first time in a long time, he felt something settle deep inside him, a feeling he hadn't known he was missing. Belonging. He looked up at HFY-SCI. You're serious. She gave a rare smile. I do not joke about such things. Max exhaled, shaking his head. I came here as just some human trying to survive. I didn't expect this. You have earned it, she said simply. There was a pause, and then, without thinking, Max reached out and lightly touched her hand. He expected her to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she held his gaze. Stay, she said, her voice almost a whisper. Max felt a grin tug at his lips. Yeah, he said. I think I will. And for the first time, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be.